In the next series of our JavaScript tutorials, we're going to look at how we can capture information from an input field, like in a form, so that we can use that content on our page. So I'm going to add in paragraph, so on this paragraph I've put some text, and then I'm also going to put in an input and the default of text works. I do want to give it an ID, so I'll call that input person. And what I also like to do is put in a placeholder. Now the placeholder will be the grayed out text that shows up in an input text field. And that's important because it helps to give that additional visual cue. We should never rely on that as the only option when we're inputting content into a field, because once you start typing, that hint disappears, and we should always still have a label element. In this case, I'm just using the text of my paragraph to do it. Then I'm going to create a button, and then we will just put an ID on it, give it B1, put some text on it, and now I want to put in one more paragraph here, and this will be the answer provided. Now we're going to change the contents of that text, and during a previous exercise you may have been asked to update text with JavaScript. Now we're doing it based on when an event happens instead of doing it immediately upon page load, which is technically an event. It's the page is loading, but we want to have user control of when it actually takes place. So P1 will be equal to document query selector, and in this case it will be P1, and then we can repeat that. P2 is going to be document query selector P2, not 12 but 2. Just remember, always put the hashtag when you're referencing the ID of it here using query selector. B1 will be equal to document query selector. And I mean, we could have just grabbed the button element because there's only one on the page, but it's a good practice to do this. Now finally, input person will be equal to document, you guessed it, query selector. Imagine that. And then input person. So let's try and type it correctly. So we're making sure we're using that name that is there. Now that we've done that, we're going to use our previous knowledge of add event listener. In quotes, we put the event we're working with, and it's in all lowercase, it's click. And then it will be our B1 click handler and false. Now if you went and referenced the documentation on add event listener on MDM, you would have found a lot of details about why we're doing this. Oh, and I did that. Every time I do the quotes, then or parentheses, I always want to close with curlies, but we don't need it. Now we have our function, and our function will be B1 click handler, a couple parentheses, then now we do the curly braces that my fingers were so eager to type. This time what we want to do is we want to change the text. So the actual letters that are in our P2 element, so P2 dot, and this time we have, of course, it's text content. Text content is the preferred way of updating it. because we want to change the content that is there. And now what I can do is I can put some quotes, and I will say your favorite person is space, end quotes, put a plus sign, and now I will use input person, but what I need to do is I want to grab the value that was there. So I type in input person dot value. So when we're doing this, we're updating the information with the value of what is going to be put inside this input field. So if I save this, now we go over here, pull up the console so we can see if anything bad is happening, and see how it says give me a person right there. So if I were to type in Fred, notice how the hint goes away. That's why it's important to always have some type of label or text information telling us what we're providing in an input field. And now when I hit submit, we will see it updated the text. If I were to change it to Scooby, now we can see, so it's continuing to update that. If I look at my markup, we can see that that markup is changing. And if we change it to Shaggy, hit submit, we can see the text has been updated. It goes to Shaggy. So we're able to use an input, a text input field, retrieve the value of whatever has been provided and put it into our document. Now let's try one more thing. If I hit submit, we can see now it's blank. So if we don't type something in, it changes it and it just puts nothing there because the value of the input field is empty. So there was no actual content in it. So this is going to allow us to start moving into our next level of working in JavaScript, where we can start to build an actual full and complete project using classes, using events, using input fields to craft a user experience.